Hello and welcome to Series 5, Episode 1 of In Suspense, a podcast and vodcast for fans and writers of crime fiction. I'm Leslie Cara and my co-host is Lauren North.
Hello, good morning, everyone.
And, I was thinking actually, Lauren, I was trying to work out how many episodes we've actually done because we do lots of we're on our fifth series and we always start back with episode 1, don't we, for each series. I was thinking, I wonder how many episodes we've actually put out in total, and it's 29. I know.
Wow.
I mean, it would have been 28, but we snuck in an extra Christmassy one, didn't we, last
We
year?
did, yes.
We
And we're getting lots of new listeners as well, and lots of downloads over Christmas. We've had lots and lots of extra downloads, which has been brilliant. So if you're new to the podcast, hello.
Yes, hello and welcome. Yes, we spoke to Vic Watson and Simon Buick before Christmas
Yes.
about the Bay Tales live event, which is still hopefully, and because there don't seem to be any restrictions coming, so cross fingers that all goes ahead on the 12th
Yes.
of February. So really looking forward to that. And today we are going to be chatting to C.L. Taylor about putting the thrill in thrillers, and she is the perfect guest for talking to us about that. But before that, we will have our normal catch up, and I guess we'll be chatting about what we've done at Christmas. I mean,
Yes.
Rashid and I had a really nice, quiet Christmas. We spent time with my brother and his family,
And his dog.
and his dog, yeah, and the dog called Rosie. And it was lovely actually because we didn't have any of the normal pressures of preparing and cooking. Not that I ever do any cooking, anyways.
Oh, I'm so jealous.
I decided long ago I don't cook. I mean, I'm not brilliant at cooking, so I'm quite happy to let someone else do the cooking. And I've decided I'm a much better guest than I am a host. I find hosting things quite stressful.
It is stressful. It's very non-stop, isn't it? I
Yeah.
think being a host.
Yeah, I'm quite happy to be an online host, for books and events and things. That's completely different. But when I've got to sort of worry about when to put the roast potatoes in and has everybody got a drink? No, no, no.
Yeah.
Although actually, I'm quite good at making sure everyone's got a drink. It's the food. But anyway, I've digressed. But yeah, we had a good Christmas, and I think Christmas is always a little bit easier when your children are grown up because you haven't got to. You do obviously, you've still got to get them presents and things, but you don't have to sort of have that mad sort of panic about, oh, have I got them the exact presents they want, and have they got equal numbers? Because when you've got kids, they're both jealous of sort of each other. And if one has 8 presents and the other has 7, it's like, why have they got one more than me? So you don't have to. I know they're dreadful, aren't they? But I don't have to worry about things like that anymore. So that was very good. In fact, this time next year, if we manage to find a house to live in, then hopefully we'll invite all our boys and their partners
And
to come
children.
and stay with us. Although having just said that makes me feel a bit exhausted.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that's an incentive to find the house or not.
No, actually, no. Maybe a small one-bedroom croft in the Highlands, perhaps.
Yes,
Yes.
I don't think you'd get
Think
many
again.
people there.
Anyway, enough about my Christmas. What about yours, Laurie? Or what about what you're
We
up to?
well, we just had a quiet one, and my husband threw his back out,
Oh,
and has been hobbling around in quite a lot of pain, so he's not been much help to me. But I'm obviously very sympathetic.
that's really
Um,
inconsiderate of him,
it's
isn't it?
very,
Put
very
his back out at
inconsiderate, but
Christmas.
he has been in a lot of pain, bless him. And there's been no one open to go and sort of help either, which has been a bit of a problem.
Mm.
But yeah, we didn't see many relatives because of COVID, obviously. But yes, it was lovely, very quiet, very nice. The children are that little bit older now, so it's not quite so frantic. I did buy Tommy an electric drum kit for Christmas. He's learning the drums,
Yes, I saw
thinking,
the picture of that and I thought, are you mad?
well, this is my thinking, and this is where I was wrong. It's got headphones, so you plug them in, and then I was like, great, we weren't even here. I wasn't aware of just how much the tapping noise was quite loud. But it is really fun to hear him. He's done it. Like, we've not heard him play before because we've never had drums. So it's quite good to hear him learning and doing things. So yeah, it's been fine actually. And what else? Yeah, no, that's about it. I think that's literally, I've just been doing edits, as I said, just before we came on, in a little bit of a panic, because I'm doing some structural edits for a romance that's out in April, and copy edits for my book 4, which is out in September. So it's been quite busy Christmas for me. I haven't had the time off that I'd have liked, I think, but there you go. That's how it goes. But it is a new series, as you say, and a new year. And despite some of the uncertainties with the pandemic, and what 2022 is going to look like, I do still think, we're making goals and resolutions, aren't we? Definitely. So yeah, I've made a few, which I think you're going to like, Leslie. I think you'll approve of these. I'm pretty sure last year my resolution was to write lots of books. Yes. But this year it is to calm down and find some balance in my life. I've had 12 months of terrible eczema on my face, and my mission for 2022 is to sort that out a bit, and which means no chocolate or red wine, which are my 2 favorite things. So
you must have some brilliant makeup then, because I've never noticed any.
Yeah, I do. I don't literally after the podcast I'll go and take it off and it'll be awful again. Yeah, that's my sort of mission for 2020. Try yoga and just have a bit more balance. And I'm going to be very clear to editors that I will not be working in August or over Christmas, and whatever comes through at any time, they have to allow the allocated time either of those ends. So I think my children are getting to that point where they're at school so much, and it's amazing I've got all this time, but that should mean I shouldn't be working at the weekends or holidays, really, I think. So I think finding that balance, I think, is my aim. What about you though, Leslie? Have you got any resolutions and goals this year?
I have, but I just want to say I thoroughly approve of yours. I think they sound very, very sensible indeed. Yes, I was a little sort of taken aback by how much you set yourself to do last year, and yes, yeah, I think finding balance is always a good idea. And I think, being mindful of that. Mine are very sort of broad and few and far between this year. I want to read more, because my reading, I haven't read as much as I wanted to read last year, and I found I couldn't read as much for some reason. I don't know, a lot of people, I found it quite difficult to read the last couple of years, really, but I need to get back fully into my reading. So read more, write more. I really want to book a holiday away somewhere hot as soon as possible. I have so missed being away, and I know that sounds a rather sort of frivolous thing to resolve to do.
No,
actually, I think I really need it. I really need just to put my bum on a sun lounger by a pool, and I think that will kickstart my reading again, because that's how I associate my true relaxation, And what was the other thing? Oh, yeah, find a new house to live in. I mean, obviously, we're quite happy in our little rental, but we obviously do need to buy a house. Find a nice house. And if I can achieve those 4 things, then I will be happy. There are other little things sort of ticking away, minor sort of, I don't know if they're resolutions or goals or what the difference is even, but there are certainly things I want to do. But like you, I want to make sure that I have enough time to prioritise relaxation and other things. Yeah.
Look at us being so very sensible.
Aren't we just? Yes. So, I think, we are going to talk, as I said earlier today, about, was it putting the thrill in thrillers, which is a jolly good thing to be talking about. And we have the perfect guest to do that, none other than C.L. Taylor, or Callie. So, welcome, C.L. Taylor. Hello and welcome, C.L. Taylor, or Callie, if we can call you that. I'm sure we can. Hope we can. To In Suspense. We are delighted to have you with us today. And before we go on to ask Callie how she puts the thrill in her thrillers, which she certainly does, I can assure you, I'm going to read out her bio. So, righty-ho. C.L. Taylor was born in Worcester and spent her early years living in various army camps in the UK and Germany. She studied psychology at the University of Northumbria and went on to forge a career in instructional design and e-learning before leaving to write full-time in 2014. She started writing short stories in 2005 and was published widely in literary and women's magazines. She also won several short story competitions. Excuse me. In 2009 and 2011, her romantic comedy novels as Callie Taylor were published by Orion and translated into 14 languages. Whilst on maternity leave with her son, Callie had an idea for a psychological thriller and turned to crime. Since then, she has published 8 psychological thrillers with HarperCollins and 2 YA novels, and is no stranger to the Sunday Times bestseller charts, and more recently was a Richard and Judy book club pick for her first hardback, Sleep. C.L. Taylor lives in Bristol with her partner and young son. Now, Callie, your most recent book, Her Last Holiday, came out last year, didn't it, in hardback?
That's right.
And it's about to be published in paperback, I think 20th of Jan, is that right?
That's right. Yeah, very good.
And it's a great read, really pacey. Lauren and I both read it. I read it last year. I think Lauren did too.
Yeah, just before Christmas.
Full of twists. We loved it. I wondered if you could tell us a little bit about it, to set the scene for our listeners.
Okay, sure. So Her Last Holiday is another psychological thriller, and this one is about wellness retreats. And it's about 2 sisters who have a 12-year age gap. There's Jenna, who's sort of more unpredictable, quite unsettled, and her older sister Fran, who is quite an interesting character. She's quite antisocial, she's a little bit prickly, but she's a teacher and she's very responsible. And the book starts basically, there's 2 timelines. So there's Jenna, who goes off on a wellness retreat in Gozo, which goes terribly wrong. 2 people die and Jenna disappears. And then 2 years later, the man responsible for the retreat, the guru, is let out of prison. He serves his prison term for what happened. And bullied by her mother, Fran goes to his next retreat to discover what happened to her sister.
Fantastic. That's a really good summary.
It is. And as you've said there, it has sort of 2 timelines and 3 female characters, all very different. And what's really amazing is as you're reading it, you know exactly where you are, you know exactly who's talking. So you really just get those voices so amazingly done. But it must have been quite difficult to challenge a structure that's quite challenging. So I just wondered, can you tell us your approach for that kind of structure? Do you have to do a lot of planning, and do you write one whole character and timeline as in one go, or do you weave them as you write them?
So as I said, there's Jenna's timeline when she actually goes on the retreat. There's Fran's timeline when she goes to a different retreat to sort of ask people if they knew Jenna and what happened. And then there's Kate, and Kate is Tom the guru's wife, and she's one of the antagonists in the novel. I do plot. I'm a massive plotter. I've got a massive whiteboard just to the side of me, and I tend to use the 4-act structure to plot my books. I have tried plotting really tightly in the past, and I've even written outlines, but that took some of the magic of writing away, because once I'd outlined, I almost felt like I'd written the book. So now I will plot, but slightly more loosely. I leave some spaces. So what I did for Her Last Holiday is use different coloured index cards. So I would plot Fran's timeline and Jenna's timeline. So they both have a midpoint twist, and they both have climaxes at the end of each of the 8 sequences. With Kate, it was slightly more of a reactionary kind of thread, because she would be reacting to what Fran was doing. So I kind of made Kate up as I was going along. So what I would do is I'd start with Fran, because she is kind of the main character. She's the one with the goal, to discover what happened to her sister. And then alternate with Jenna, and then put Kate in just where it felt right that Kate needed to interject.
It's always fascinating, isn't it, to hear how other writers plan. I love listening to it. And of course, it kind of changes with each book sometimes, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely does. People assume it gets easier with every book, and it doesn't. It really doesn't.
In my experience, it's getting harder. But anyway.
Yes, that too. Yeah.
I loved, Callie, that your book was set in Gozo. I really did, because it reminded me, I actually went to Gozo in the mid-80s, and which was a long while ago. I'm very, very old. And that was actually before a lot. I mean, Gozo is obviously less touristy than Malta. It's a smaller island. But in the 80s, there was even less tourist infrastructure than there is now. And it was a real experience. We stayed in a little sort of rented villa and had an amazing time. I mean, sort of I actually ended up being abducted by a member of the Gazetan Mafia, but that's another story which we won't go into now. We'll maybe discuss that another time. But I was wondering, there's a thriller there somewhere.
I'd say so.
I was wondering we were wondering how well you know the island of Gozo, and what it was that made you want to set her last holiday there.
Well, it's interesting that you went there in the 80s, actually, because I had some school friends who went there, probably late 80s, I think, when we just finished school, early 90s. And I remember at the time thinking, oh, that sounds quite interesting, quite magical. And it must have stayed in my head. But when I decided to write the book, I knew that I wanted Jenna to be somewhere that wasn't Britain, and it needed to be an island. And I mean, there's no language barrier on Gozo, because pretty much everybody speaks English, but you can only get off the island when the ferry's running. So if the ferry isn't running, then you're stuck on the island, or you have to wait for the next ferry. And I love setting books on islands with that, you can't just escape, you can't just get in your car and go. So I considered a number of different islands, but Gozo just appealed. And because I looked at some photos on the internet of different places, and I was like, oh, Gozo looks amazing. It's got that. I wanted cliff tops, I wanted wild winds and rugged landscapes and that sort of thing. And so I went there in 2019 in December, just after Christmas, and I took a friend with me, and I just fell in love with the place, and it was just perfect. We stayed in a hotel in Tarsenk, and I was like, should we just go and wander, towards the edge of the cliffs and have a look and stuff? And as I was just wandering, I saw the stone circle where the sweat lodge tent, and it almost felt serendipitous that I was just like, this is just perfect. This is the hotel where they're staying, where I'm staying. This is the remains of the stone circle. There's the cliff and the drop where Jenna disappears. And it was wonderful. I took videos, I wrote notes, and it really massively helped the process of writing, I think.
That sounds amazing. Like a fantastic research trip, and all tax deductible as well. How
and the suntan as well. Sounds like
I'm going to set my next novel somewhere remote.
Yes,
I certainly need to do that. And so you're not you're someone who goes away quite a lot, I think, Callie, aren't you? I've seen on Twitter you do love a good writing retreat. But have you ever been on a retreat like the one in the book, sort of one that's so structured and organised like that? Is that where you got your idea from?
I sort of accidentally ended up on one. I won't name the company because I don't want to get sued, but I was supposed to go, several years ago, I was supposed to go on a writing retreat on a Greek island. And they contacted me beforehand to say there aren't enough numbers for you to put you up in the little town where we were supposed to be running it. So what we're suggesting is that we put the writer group in with this other group who are doing a more holistic retreat. And I didn't even really know what holistic meant. And I just thought, well, as long as it's not cancelled, yeah, of course I'll go. And it was, I'm not a very kind of sort of hippie-ish person. I'm quite sort of scientific. I'll embrace, essential oils and stuff like that. But the expressive dance that was going on made me feel quite uncomfortable. And some of the things where you had to sort of walk around a circle and go up to people and give them a compliment and then hug them. And it all just felt like a little bit intense to me. But I made some great friends there, and we'd sort of run off if we were asked to partake in anything that we found slightly uncomfortable. But the thing about Her Last Holiday is that part of what Tom offers is therapy. And whilst I was at this retreat, there was a life coach, and I remember his group going in to chat to him. And afterwards they came to lunch and they were broken. They were just broken people. And what they'd all done is shared these most awful traumatic things that had happened in their lives. And they were broken by sharing, but also by everything they heard. And when I asked these people, I was like, what did he do to help put you back together? And they were like, well, nothing really. And I just thought how awful it was to take these people and get them to share their most traumatic pasts and not fix them, just to leave them like, open emotional wounds. And that really stayed with me, because I just thought that was just terrible practice. So all of this, plus plus a few unusual therapies that I've tried, all came together to make up the wellness retreat in Her Last Holiday.
Gosh,
wow,
that's really really interesting. That he didn't that they didn't actually offer them any way out of that sort of danger of all the trauma. Gosh, yeah,
shocking.
Really shocking. In fact, I listened to a radio interview that you did last year, Callie, and you were talking actually about similar things. You were saying about some of these wellness treatments and therapies and how dangerous they can be, which is obviously what you were just touching on there. And I think you mentioned something about a real life case in America where people actually did die in a sweat lodge. And I wondered if you could tell us a little more about that and about sweat lodges, because until I read your novel, I'd never even heard of a sweat lodge.
Yeah.
No.
It's news to me. So I wondered if you could expand on that for us.
No, I hadn't either. Before I started writing Her Last Holiday, I watched lots of documentaries about gurus. Largely, they were American. And what I found fascinating is how what is essentially just an average person, an average man, can set themselves up as a wellness specialist or a wellness expert. And what I discovered in these documentaries is they take from different cultures and sort of bring it together and into an experience. So obviously there's like the hot colds and that sort of thing, which is fairly safe. You can go to Wales and do that here, sort of thing. But the sweat lodge experience was taken from the Native Americans, and it's a sort of purification ceremony where you build this tent, and then it's almost like a sauna, and you have to sort of stay in there not drinking for a certain number of hours. And the idea is that when you do eventually come out, it's almost like a rebirth when you sort of naked crawl through the flaps of the tent into the outside world. You've had this kind of experience. But what happened on this particular sweat lodge is that it wasn't done properly. I think they used the wrong materials on the tent, which made the temperatures get much too high. People weren't allowed to have a break. They weren't allowed to crawl out to get a drink or have a drink in there. There were people with health conditions that hadn't been properly monitored. So lots of people died. I think 3 people died in that case. And it was the first time in America that someone had been prosecuted for something like this and actually sent to prison for it. And nothing had happened like this here either. So I kind of used that to sort of make the crux of the book, where everything goes frighteningly wrong.
And it does.
It was, and it was so shocking as well, the scenes how they unfold. So you did such a great job thrilling us there for sure. And so our topic today is putting the thrill in thrillers. And since you've done this 8 times or 10 times with your YA thrillers, if we include them, can you tell us what you think makes a good psychological thriller? Is it the reveals and the twists? Or do you think that that's too much emphasis is put on them and that there's something else that makes a great thriller in your view?
I've been mulling this over, and it's really hard to answer at the moment because there are so many psychological thrillers and I've read so many. So my answer now would probably be quite different from my answer 5 years ago, I think. For me, who gets sent loads and loads of proofs, a great psychological thriller has to do something a bit different. There's certain storylines that I've read over and over again and that I've written myself. I mean, it does feel like there's only so many storylines that you can pursue and still call it a psychological thriller. But I think the main thing in a good psychological thriller is the voice. If I'm opening a proof and the voice is like nothing that I've read before, or it's immediately captivating, that's the first thing that's got me. Then it would be the character. I need to find that character fascinating, not necessarily likable, but fascinating enough that I want to keep staying in their head or finding out about them. And I want to be on their side, whatever it is they're trying to find out or discover. I need to be really, really invested in that. Otherwise, I will just put it down. And obviously, twists and reveals, I can't help but read a book and try and guess the twist. And so if a writer catches me off guard and I genuinely didn't see it coming, then that's an absolute win. The last book that blew me away in terms of its plotting was 56 Days by Catherine Ryan Howard.
Yeah,
I didn't see how that was I hadn't predicted how that was going to turn out. And for me, that was just a sign of brilliance. The way she constructed that novel was just perfect. Loved it.
It was, yeah. I love that one too.
Yeah,
that's really inspiring to when you read something like that, isn't it? Because as you say, as writers, it kind of almost spoils the reading experience a bit because they think, oh yeah, I know what you're doing. I know where you're foreshadowing that. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, pace is obviously key, isn't it, in a thriller? And Lauren and I have chatted before about about how you inject pace into a novel, about chapter length, about having making sure you've got cliffhangers at the end of each chapter. And we were wondering about your take on this. Do you, as you're writing, are you automatically thinking about those things, or do you find that the cliffhanger element gets put in afterwards at the editing stage? How does that work for you?
I've changed slightly over the years. I remember when I wrote my second book, The Lie, and delivered it to my editor. She said, "Callie, you don't have to have a cliffhanger at the end of every chapter." But for a lot of people, that's the book of mine that they enjoyed most. So I think, cliffhangers, drive pace. These days, I'm not quite so obsessed with putting a cliffhanger at the end of every chapter. What I do like to do is introduce some other element of mystery or some other tension as the book moves along. But a lot of it to do with pace comes in my first reread. So once I've written that first chapter, that first draft, I will read it through, and I will, anywhere that my attention wanes, I will do a little scribble and just write boring, and then I'll keep reading. And then I'll go back and I'll look at those bits where my attention waned and I wanted to put the book down and I found it boring, and work out why. And can I just lose this completely, or do I need to insert more tension into this particular scene or this particular part of the book? What has happened in this bit that I've sort of, I could abandon the book now.
Yeah.
So that's when I do most of the work, I think, to do with pace. Also, I've got quite a short attention span when I'm reading and when I'm writing. So I think that helps in a way with pace, because if I'm starting to flag when I'm writing it, the chances are the reader's flagging when they're reading it as well. So I try and make it fun for myself. I try and have those scenes that I'm looking forward to writing.
Yeah.
Amazing.
It's always hard, isn't it, to read our own writing with that fresh reader's eye, because we already know what's happening and we know the twists and we know the clues, and it's hard to get that completely objective view. I suppose that's why we need editors, isn't it, to help us with that.
Yeah.
But what about chapter length? Do you find that you have a natural chapter length? I always find that mine always seem to come out, mine are very short, and they always seem to come out between sort of 1,300 and 1,600 words. Sometimes I'll write a 2,000 word chapter, but it's normally round about there. And do you have a sort of natural chapter length, or do you find that varies between books?
I think it chops and changes within a book. So you might have a 300 word chapter, and then you might have a 2,500 word chapter, but I rarely go much higher. I'm just trying to think the most recent book that I've written. I think towards the end, when it's the climax of the book, the chapters probably get longer, but there's lots of scenes within that chapter. I think at the beginning, in order to pull the reader in, I probably keep each chapter under 2,500 words, I think.
Yeah.
Some of them can be quite short. But like I said, I like to just get on to the next bit. So I don't like a chapter to drag on for too long. And I think readers really appreciate short chapters as well, because there's that feeling of completion. I've finished another chapter, on to the next one. And if they're short, I think you can start to speed through the book like that, and that's what we want. We want them to just keep turning the pages.
Yes, and I think you're right. As they get longer towards the end of the book, but that's fine because they're read as quickly because of all the action and it's the climax. So people are less likely to notice that it's a longer chapter because it's exciting. Yeah. Oh, excellent.
Amazing. And in Her Last Holiday, you have 3 points of view, as we've talked about, but I think I'm right in saying that Sleep had quite a few more than that. So I'm always interested to know sort of what you think makes a good number of points of view to keep the thrill in the thriller. Some people will say no more than 3 to 5, or the reader starts to get quite confused. Do you have a view on this? And when you're reading books, do you have a number of points of view that you quite like to have?
In terms of reading books, I don't mind multiple characters as long as there's good sort of forward momentum in the narrative. Liz Nugent is one of my favourite writers, and she often has multiple characters. Unravelling Oliver is the first of her books that I read, and her first book, and it's brilliant because you get the different characters all portraying Oliver, so you find out through the eyes of all of these different characters. So I do like to read it as long as the novel is compulsive enough. In my own, you're right that Sleep does have quite a lot of characters, and it has more male characters actually as secondary characters than most of my other books. And then you've got the voice of the mysterious antagonist. I think basically I just write whatever feels right, and my editor will tell me if she thinks it's too much. In Sleep, I did have an extra character who didn't necessarily have their own point of view, but my editor said, I think you've got too many people in the hotel now. And I think it's going to be confusing for the reader to have all of these different suspects. But I was very disappointed because in my head, this character was Idris Elba. And I was dreaming about an adaptation and meeting him on the red carpet. And
You know, funny you should say that, Kelly. I dream about Idris Elba all the time as well. Oh dear. Can you talk us through how your ideas sort of develop? You know, do your novels start with a character or with a scene or with a twist or with the premise itself? And also has your process changed as you've more and more novels that you've written?
Yeah, the first few were based on fears. So The Accident, which was my first psychological thriller, was the fear of a abusive ex returning into my life. And so that fueled that novel. And then The Lie is about toxic friendships. And the fear that somebody could turn everybody else against you. So I used that for a while, and then when we got to the escape, then I started to be influenced by news stories. So the escape, the spark of that idea came when I was flicking through Facebook, and I follow Avon and Somerset Constabulary, and a woman there was an alert out for a woman who had disappeared with her son, and they were like, it's dangerous, and the relatives were commenting underneath, she's not dangerous, she's keeping him safe. And I just thought, what if you were that woman that the police were telling people was the bad mother, and actually you were keeping your child safe. So I used that for the jumping off point, and for the fear as well. The teacher Jeremy, who took his pupil to France, I started to think about, what would life be like for her years later, and how would she feel about him and what he'd done to her, and what if he saw this man grooming another child. And so that was the jumping off point for that. But more recently, it's just the thought that jumps into your head, and it doesn't necessarily reflect in the book. So the new book that comes out in hardback in end of June, it's called The Guilty Couple. And the starting point for that was that I wanted to write a heist novel, but I didn't want it to be a heist for jewels or money. And I thought, why else might you plan a heist? And I thought, what about snatching evidence that proves that you're innocent? And that was the jumping point. And in actual fact, the actual heist only takes a chapter, and there's loads of other stuff and loads of other themes that have come in, and plot points around it. But it just takes that one thought, doesn't it? And then you jump off from there, and suddenly the novel is a thing.
Yes, and it's the thought that sort of won't let you go, because we have lots of ideas, don't we? And some of them just come into our head and go out again. But those ones that linger and that you just can't stop thinking about, they're the ones that we normally think, well, that's probably got legs then, hasn't it?
You need that idea, because it takes so long to write a novel that you need that idea that excites you, that you're desperate to write. At the moment, I'm trying to come up with an idea for my next book, which will be psych thriller number 10. And I've got two, but neither of them is going, spend a year of your life on me. Which one is going to make me want to go to my desk? And at the moment, maybe I'm just a bit fatigued. I'm like, none of them make me want to go to my desk. I'd rather do some knitting. So I'm still waiting for that idea, and I have to trust that it will come eventually. Otherwise, I'm going to have to extend my deadline.
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned your knitting. We didn't put this in the questions, but I do notice that you do so many crafty things. Does that help you relax? And it's a complete change, isn't it? So I didn't mean to throw that one in there. I'm
trying to make an effort. Social media is so addictive that I can happily do it all day. Even when I'm watching telly in the evening, I'll be like, I will just have a quick look on Twitter, or just have a quick. And I think because so much of my Twitter and my social media is book industry related, it basically feels like I'm working from the moment I get up to the moment that I go to sleep, and I don't think that's good for you.
No.
So I started. I've always been crafty and arty. I love that kind of thing. I deliberately started trying to do crafts in the evening while I'm watching telly, to stop me from going on social media. Yesterday I made a whole Lego bouquet, so
Wow.
it could get quite expensive. I mostly stick to knitting, which is a bit cheaper.
That's a good idea. I mean, I'm not crafty at all, so I don't think I could do that. But you're really talented at it. Some of the things you post, I'm just thinking, my God, she's incredible, this woman.
I think a lot of writers have a crafty side. I've seen like Jill Mansell make stuff, and Rachel Block's a fantastic artist.
Oh,
And
really?
Oh, now I feel a bit mediocre because I'm
Yeah.
not.
Me too. I can't cook, can't do any
I
crafting.
can't cook and I can't sing. So there we go.
But Callie, you also write YA thrillers, and they fascinate me. How do they differ? Do you think, or do they differ actually much from your adult thrillers? What different things do you have to sort of bear in mind?
Yeah, I mean, I still plot and plan them in the same way. I still start off with a main character and a goal. What do they want to achieve? And I will use the 4-act structure and put some sort of jumping off points on my whiteboard and plot it. But I think with psychological suspense and psychological thrillers, there's quite a lot of reflection, and the characters spend quite a lot of time running through the clues that they've got and trying to work out this and that. And also most of them are older women, maybe 30 to 55, say, and women of that age have different kind of priorities and responsibilities and worries. And when you're writing for young adults, you have to put yourself into that mindset. What do they worry about at that age? They worry about what their peers think of them. They worry about nobody liking them. They worry about bullying. They worry about romantic relationships. And so you put yourself into the mindset of that teen. But also you have to be aware that the attention span maybe of that age group is even worse than mine. So you need to focus on the action and moving things forward. You can't have too many moments of rest where they can put the book down. And actually, I loved writing them. Also, they're very short. They're about 70,000 words. Actually, my first draft of The Island, my last one, was only 60,000 words. And my editor said, you're gonna have to, add a bit more to get it up to 70. But I don't know if it's because I'm not an established YA author, so I don't feel much pressure. But I wrote both of them in less than 9 weeks.
Wow.
And there was a freedom to writing them, and just a real joy of writing something a bit different with a different age group. And they're a lot of fun to write.
Fantastic.
Would you ever go lower and do sort of middle grade, I think it's called, isn't it, like the younger kids, or you think you're sticking with your 2 that you've got?
I would love to, because my son's 10, and I'm very aware of the sort of books that capture his attention and the books that don't. But he likes Wimpy Kid and Tom Gates and stuff, and I don't think I can do that kind of funny school-based boy book. Something a bit more fantasy-y would be great fun, I think. I don't think I could write dark for that age group, because I think I'd probably take a step too far.
Yeah, that's what I worry about as well. Yeah.
Because you can go pretty dark with young adult writing. I mean, in The Island, the themes are, there's suicide, there's mental health, there's grief, there's all sorts. But you have to be very careful for that middle grade age. So I think I'd sort of go fantasy with jeopardy. I'd probably stay away from crime if I did write for them.
I think so. And talking of books, we do always like to ask our guests what they've been reading recently. So have you been diving into some books over Christmas? What's been keeping you awake at night? What have you been reading?
Well, I've currently got an audiobook and a proof on the go. So the audiobook's already published, and it's Rock, Paper, Scissors by Alice Feeney.
Yeah, I've seen that a lot.
I'd seen a lot of noise about it on various Facebook psychological thriller groups. and I was like, I'm going to have to read this. And what she does so beautifully is the he said, she said thing. The female point of view and the male point of view, the voices are very different. She weaves in the backstory really well without slowing down the pace. I've got my suspicions about what the twist might be, but I don't know for sure. And that is what is driving me to keep listening, because I want to know if I'm right, and I'm not sure if I am. So that's brilliant. And the other book that I'm reading is A Proof of Reputation by Sarah Vaughan.
Oh yes, I read that recently. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. And again, that I saw a lot of noise about it on Twitter, and I had it on my pile, and I thought, I haven't read many books set in the political arena, many psych thrillers. So I'm gonna give this one a go. And I love it. It feels very real. And I feel very invested in this woman and her life, and the creepy things that are happening. And hugely enjoying it.
Yeah, I read it. I loved it as well. And I did come away thinking, why would any woman want to be an MP though? I just what are you doing? The abuse, which it's awful and it's scary. So, yes. And what about you, Leslie? What are you?
You'll have to skip over me. I'm having a little bit of a break at the moment. It sounds awful having a break from reading, but I've just felt that I just needed some time. I've just been watching TV and watching things on Netflix, and I saw yesterday you tweeted about The Lost Daughter, Kelly. I watched that last night as well and absolutely loved it, because it was
wasn't it good?
Brilliant film. And so I'm getting back. I'm going to get back into my reading this week, but I've really had a bit of a break over Christmas, because also I'm immersed in drafting my own novel at the moment, and I just haven't had the brain space for it, really. That's what I was saying earlier, Callie, when Lauren and I were having our little chat, that I really need to book up a holiday away. I hope it won't be my last holiday. We'll just segue there. But I do need to book a holiday and just get back, just put my bum on a sun lounger and kickstart my reading quickly for pleasure, which has sort of gone a little bit lately. But anyway,
I've suffered that over the last few years, and have huge moments of reading drought where I cannot settle into any book, and I just discard them and end up just watching TV instead. And I think it's perfectly natural. I know so many writers who find themselves in the same situation. And as you said, I only really get into that headspace on holiday.
I'm just so reassured to hear you say that. So reassured, because I feel terrible guilt, because as you know, we're sent so many proofs, and and it's not just proofs that I'm sent. There are books that I really want to read desperately, and I start them and I just don't have the impetus to finish. And I never used to be like that.
And I think the difference when you are on holiday is that you're so completely committed only to the book. And I was reading a book that I was sort of okay about before I went on holiday. And then the minute I got on holiday, it became the best book I was ever read. But I don't know if I'd have felt that way about it if I'd still been home dipping into it at night. So it really changes your reading experience as well.
I think it absolutely does. Yeah.
What about you then, Laurie? Have you been reading?
I've been reading. So I've just finished last night, Take Your Breath Away, the newest Linwood Barclay, which was brilliant. It's the first one I've read of his, which I'm horrified now because I'm going to have to read loads more. They're brilliant. Really quite like Simon Koenig, actually, like a really pacey, twisty, actiony book, which I really enjoyed that. And then I've been listening to A Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood. For the first, I've not listened to it before, and I feel
that's my favourite book.
Yeah, and it was mind-blowing. I loved it. And then to counteract it, I'm now listening to The End of Men, which is shocking and awful, and I'm just loving it. So I'm not.
Who is that by?
You're going to ask me who. I'm going to have to let you know now.
Okay, don't worry.
I'm going to tell you now. When it's on Audible, I don't check. I don't really register who. It's by Christina Sweeney Baird.
Okay.
So I've seen lots of things about it, and there's a show that I don't know if it's based on this book or on a similar concept, but it's about a virus that only hits men, and so all the industries that are so male dominated become affected, and it's quite scary but amazing as well. So that's what I've been reading. Yes.
Oh, well, you mentioned Take Your Breath Away. That is one I have read, and that was propulsive reading, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was good.
I
Yeah.
finished that very quickly. Yeah, yeah. So I think we're on to the fun question now. And since your book, Callie, Her Last Holiday, is because it centres around a self-help guru and a wellness retreat, we were wondering, thought it might. Oh, can't speak. Put my teeth in. We thought it might be fun to ask you the wackiest thing that you've either ever done or heard about on one of these, wellness treatments or therapies.
I don't know if it's very wacky, but I was looking for a therapist a few years ago to like deal with anxiety, and I kind of just snatched at the first one that I found on Google, and I went along, and she said, "Are you aware that I'm a body therapist?" And I was like, no. And she said, "Ah." And I was like, okay. And she basically, everything that she asked me was, where do you feel it in your body? And so I was a bit like, where do I feel it in my body? So I was like, okay, I feel this emotion in my stomach. I was like, okay, I got that. She's like, and what color is it? And I was like, oh my God. And she was like, and what shape is it? And I was just like, I don't know. I don't know. So in the end, I just started using my imagination. And I was just like, it's a hard black diamond. And it was absolutely useless. And I never went back. But I got to use some adjectives.
That's hilarious.
But you did have that in Her Last Holiday, which was where do you feel the emotion, which I thought was really interesting because it made me think about where I feel my stress, which is like right there.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that there is some basis to it. The other one that I actually, as research for The Lie, I went to see a reflexologist. And I'm sure that there's loads of them that are really good, but the one that I went to see, she looked at my feet, and then she looked at me, and she was like, "There's diabetes. You've got diabetes, or there's diabetes in your family." And I went, "No." And I just thought, you're just looking at me thinking that I'm overweight, therefore there must be diabetes in my family. Okay. And then she went, "Heart disease. There's and I was like, there's no heart disease." And basically what I realized was she was just doing cold reading. When Derren Brown does this to show that psychics do the same sort of thing. And I just thought, you are an absolute fraud. And I can't believe people come to you for things like infertility or weight loss or whatever. And it just made me cross. But needless to say, I never went back.
That's awful, really, because they're getting people when they're people at their most vulnerable, aren't they? And when they're sort of searching for answers, it's despicable, really. Gosh.
It is. It's awful.
Yeah.
That wasn't very fun, was it?
Well, I've got a fun one. Can I do fun one, Lauren? Well, you mentioned earlier, Callie, I think somewhere when we were talking, you mentioned expressive dance.
Don't ask me to do any expressive
Let me tell you, I once was persuaded, against my better judgment, to attend a 5 rhythms dancing group. And my friend, who is into all this sort of stuff, she said she found it really useful. Well, honestly, it was the worst hour of my life. Well, no, that's a slight exaggeration, but it wasn't something I'll be doing again. I can't remember exactly what all these rhythms were, but you basically had to freestyle. So one would be very sort of lyrical music, and you'd just sort of walk around this hall. So you'd be in this hall doing all this sort of stuff with other people. And I'm quite inhibited. So unless I've had a few to drink, which is very rarely, may I tell you, I didn't do. So I was sort of skirting around the perimeter of this hall thinking, oh my God, and then another one was the staccato rhythm. So everyone's doing this, it was bizarre, honestly. And then at one point, I mean, honestly, I shudder to tell you this, but at one point, one woman I saw, she put her hands down her trousers, and then the next minute she was daubing.
Oh, no.
And I said she was daubing something on her forehead. I said to my friend, I said, what was that? Because she said it was menstrual blood.
Oh, no.
Oh, no.
I thought, well, do you know what? I'm not going back to Five Rhythms dancing. So, you know, apologies to any listeners who do enjoy that dancing, and I'm sorry, you know, I made a distasteful. Well, it's not distasteful, but it's just weird, isn't it? Weird.
Weird.
So, yeah, it was wacky, and I thought, no, not for me, not for me.
Yeah.
What about you, Lauren? Can you?
Well, mine's probably more a bit like Kelly's. And I went to see an acupuncturist. I was having really bad problems with my neck, and I'd already paid loads of money on like the sports massage and the osteopath, and I was like, I'll just try anything. In the end, I just needed a special pillow, which cost 20 quid. So just get the pillow first. But so I went to see this acupuncturist. And I mean, I don't know if I believe in all these things, but I was prepared to give it a go. And she was jabbing needles like in my foot and in my knee, and then sort of talking about the full moon and, like you say, cycles. And I was like, I don't know how this has got anything to do with neck pain, you know. And I just walked out and thought, that has just done nothing other than drain my bank account of money, basically. So yeah, I felt the same as you do, Kelly, that yeah, I don't know how much part of it is that if you fully believe that this thing is going to fix you, because you've studied psychology as well, Kelly. So I mean, that's where I get it from. And that's I was talking about my skin earlier, and I have terrible eczema at the moment, and like how I just want someone to give me a placebo and just say this will fix you, and for me to just completely believe it and be fixed, because I know that I can do it that way, but I just no one will. So yes, so I was the same as you. I think I think the three of us seem like we're quite scientific and hardened, aren't we? So, but that is unfortunately all we've got time for in today's episode. So thank you so much, Callie, for coming on and talking to us about her last holiday and putting the thrill in thrillers. It's been absolutely fascinating for us, and I'm sure for our readers as well. For everyone listening, Her Last Holiday is currently out in hardback and is out in paperback in a couple of weeks' time. It's also available right now on Audible, which is how I listened to it, and the voices were fantastic. So do check out Callie's latest book.
Yes, thank you so much, Callie. We've really, really enjoyed having you on today, and wish you all the success with your paperback. And before we go, we've just got to make a little announcement about future episodes, because we've got some exciting news. Last year we had Philippa East on, and she did a session with us, an episode with us on author well-being, and we had such a good response from that. And there's nothing wacky about Philippa East's well-being. No. It's very sensible.
I listened to that one. She was really, really good.
Really good, yeah.
And because we had such good feedback from that, we've asked Philippa to come and she's going to do some mini episodes, or mini-sodes are they called? I'm not sure. And they're coming out in between, because this normally comes out once a fortnight. So the first one will come out, is it next week?
Yes, next Thursday, yes.
So so they'll be shorter, and they'll just be, I think they'll just be Philippa. Will we be involved? I don't know. We haven't talked about it.
Oh, we haven't really planned it.
We haven't really planned it. We're very last minute. Yes. Very last minute.
They're only going to be sort of like 10-15 minutes each episode in between our main ones, and it's going to be on topics sort of like author well-being, I think, like managing stress and that kind of thing, isn't it? So,
and I can assure you, by next Thursday we will have planned it.
By next Tuesday we'll record it.
So now that just leaves me with the task of saying thank you for listening, and it's goodbye from Callie.
Goodbye, thank you so much for having me on.
And it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from them.